Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into maybe the biggest debate in fitness. You know the one, cardio versus resistance training. Specifically, when your main goal is losing fat. Which one really works better? We've all heard that catchy phrase forever. Cardio burns fat, weights build muscle. Simple. Maybe a bit too simple, though. Yeah, that's what we think. Because we've got this major 2025 meta-analysis right here. It synthesizes dozens of trials. And honestly, it kind of reframes the whole comparison. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. Get you past that t-shirt slogan, bring you up to speed on the modern evidence-based view. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's actually amazing how much the thinking has shifted on this over the years, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look back, 70s, 80s, cardio was absolutely king. Think about aerobics classes, jogging everywhere, that whole obsession with the fat burning zone.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Right. And resistance training,
Yeah.
lifting weights. That was seen as really niche, just for bodybuilders, serious athletes.
Yeah.
But then you fast forward maybe to the 2010s, and wow, resistance training had this huge comeback, this renaissance. Research started showing that building muscle, it wasn't just about looks or raw strength. It had these incredible, total health benefits, better heart health, blood sugar control, even helping your brain, your bones, just vast benefits. The focus shifted so hard, didn't it, to the point where some people almost started dismissing steady-state cardio as, not very effective.
Totally. Like the pendulum just swung completely the other way. Okay, but before we dive into the head-to-head comparison from this new analysis, we have to lay down the bedrock principle, right? The one thing that no amount of running or lifting can just magically overcome. Both methods, cardio, weights, they only lead to fat loss if you're actually in a caloric deficit. You have to be burning more energy than you're taking in. That's the bottom line. Non-negotiable.
Absolutely. That baseline is crucial. And what's fascinating here is how each type of exercise helps create that deficit. They use completely different machinery inside your body. So when you do cardio running, cycling, swimming, you're primarily tapping into your aerobic system. It needs oxygen, it's built for endurance, and it mainly uses stored fats and carbohydrates for fuel. Makes you more efficient over the long haul.
Right, the oxygen-dependent engine. So if cardio is using that steady oxygen supply, what about resistance training, those short, intense bursts of effort? Where's that energy coming from?
Yeah. Resistance training uses your quick-fire energy systems. For those initial, really explosive movements, maybe just a few seconds, that's the phosphagen system. Think of it as your body's immediate emergency fuel, ATP and creatine and phosphate. Then for slightly longer sets, still high intensity, it shifts gears to the anaerobic glycolytic system. That burns through stored muscle glycogen carbs, essentially without needing oxygen right away. And that's the kind of activity that really stimulates muscle growth and strength gains.
Okay, different engines understood. Now let's get to the results, the numbers from that big 2025 meta-analysis you mentioned, because this is where I think some old ideas really get challenged. We're talking 31 trials, almost 1,300 people, comparing aerobic, resistance, and doing both.
Yeah, and the headline numbers, well, at first glance, they almost seem to support the old cardio for fat loss idea. When you compare the groups directly, the programs that included aerobic exercise, either cardio alone or cardio plus weights, they did result in slightly more total fat loss than just doing weights alone. We're talking, on average, about 1.1 kilograms more fat loss. That's roughly, 2.4 pounds?
Okay, 2.4 pounds more fat loss with cardio involved.
But when you looked at body composition, specifically preserving muscle, resistance training was the clear winner. It was way better at helping people hang on to or even gain fat-free mass, muscle basically. The groups doing resistance training gained about 0.9 kilos, almost 2 pounds, of muscle on average. The aerobic-only groups, not so much. They didn't really gain muscle.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, isn't it? The initial look says cardio helps lose a bit more fat overall. So cardio wins for fat loss, right? Case closed. But I remember reading something about a flaw, or maybe just a really important detail in how these studies were often set up.
That's exactly right. You've hit on the critical nuance. The study calls it the time paradox. Because when the researchers looked closer, specifically at trials where they carefully matched the total time spent exercising, say everyone did a 60-minute session, whether it was cardio or lifting, well, guess what? Those differences in total fat loss, they pretty much vanished. They disappeared.
Wait, hang on. That seems huge. So an hour of cardio versus an hour in the gym lifting weights resulted in similar fat loss. Because if I go for a 60-minute run, I'm moving, I'm burning calories pretty much for that whole hour.
Exactly. A 60-minute steady cardio session is roughly 60 minutes of continuous work. But now think about a typical resistance training workout. Let's say it's also scheduled for 60 minutes. You do a set, then you rest for what, 1 minute,
Mm.
2 minutes, maybe even 3 between heavy sets.
Yeah, easily. Sometimes more if it's really heavy.
Right, so across that entire 60-minute session, the actual time spent lifting the weight might only be 10, maybe 15 minutes total. The other 45 or 50 minutes, that's rest time, recovery between sets.
Okay, hold on. You're telling me that 10 or 15 minutes of hard lifting spread out over an hour with rests can lead to the same fat loss as nearly 60 solid minutes of cardio. That's a massive difference in actual work time. How does that even work physiologically?
It works because the calorie burning doesn't just stop when you put the weights down. It's about what happens after the workout.
Yeah.
We're talking about EPOC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption.
EPOC.
Right, the afterburn
Big
effect.
crack.
Exactly, the afterburn. Think of it like this. Resistance training, especially intense stuff, it creates a bigger physiological disruption. You've got muscle microtrauma that needs repair, hormone levels are all over the place, your body's internal balance homeostasis is just more disturbed than after steady cardio. So your body has to work harder, burn more calories for hours afterward to clean things up, restore fuel, balance pH, repair tissue, get back to normal.
So lifting burns fewer calories during the session itself, minute for minute of actual work.
Correct.
But it shifts a significant chunk of the calorie burn into that recovery phase afterwards.
Precisely. There was one trial they highlighted where EPOC stayed elevated, around 20% above baseline resting metabolism for the entire 24 hours after a high-intensity resistance circuit. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, steady-state cardio gives you more burn during the activity. Resistance training pushes some of that burn into the hours after you're done. That's how they ended up looking equal for fat loss when the total session time was matched, despite the huge difference in active work.
Okay, that EPOC explanation makes sense. But it immediately makes me think, well, if lifting creates this awesome afterburn, why not just ditch cardio altogether and just lift for like way longer? 3 hours of lifting to really max out that EPOC.
The tempting thought. But that's where you run smack into the wall of practical physiology. Recovery. Resistance training is incredibly demanding on your muscles and your nervous system, the neuromuscular system. If you just try to crank up the volume massively, just lift and lift and lift to burn more calories, your performance tanks. Fatigue builds up way too fast, and your risk of getting injured just skyrockets.
Right, you just can't recover from that kind of beating day after day.
Exactly. Your body simply can't keep up with the repair demands if you push the resistance volume that high, purely for calorie burn. Now, contrast that with steady-state cardio. It's generally much less taxing on the neuromuscular system, which means you can usually increase the duration or do it more often, much more easily, without completely wrecking your recovery for everything else.
So cardio becomes the more scalable tool for just adding sheer energy expenditure volume when recovery is the limiting factor.
You got it. By definition, it's often the more efficient way to create a larger sustainable caloric deficit through volume of activity, precisely because it's easier to recover from.
Okay, so this leads to a pretty important question then, doesn't it? If the calorie deficit is king for fat loss, and resistance training can contribute significantly to that deficit, partly through EPC, and crucially, it preserves muscle, is cardio strictly necessary if someone's only goal is shedding body fat?
Well, if you look at it purely through the lens of the fat loss equation, just creating the deficit, then theoretically no. You could create that deficit just through careful diet and enough effective resistance training that you can actually recover from. But, and this is a huge, but that completely misses the wider picture of health, longevity, and just feeling good.
Ah, right. The benefits beyond just the number on the scale.
Precisely. Cardio provides really critical, specialized benefits that lifting doesn't fully replicate. Think about heart health, lung capacity, improving insulin sensitivity in different ways, stress reduction, mental well-being. And if we look at that other 2025 meta-analysis, the one linking activity to health outcomes, higher levels of physical activity, often stuff measured by step counts, which is inherently more cardio-like, were strongly tied to lower risks of major health problems. So cardio is vital for overall health, regardless of whether it's technically mandatory for the fat loss math itself.
Okay, that really brings it all together nicely. So taking all this in the time paradox, the EPOC effect, the muscle preservation from lifting, the health benefits of cardio, how do we translate this into practical advice? So what does this all mean for someone listening right now trying to figure out their plan? It seems pretty clear we need to stop thinking of cardio and weights as enemies, right? Or like you have to choose one. They're different tools, specialized tools. And the smart approach is using each one for what it does best.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So aerobic exercise, cardio, that's your best bet for efficiently racking up energy expenditure. creating that calorie deficit in a way that's generally easier to recover from, volume-wise, plus all those unique health perks.
Yeah.
And resistance training. That's your defense strategy. It's the key to making sure that when the scale does go down, what you're losing is mostly fat, not your hard-earned muscle.
That's the crucial part for body composition and long-term metabolism.
So the really sensible, evidence-based approach, enjoy both, leverage both.
Use cardio to help drive the deficit and get those broad health benefits. Use weights to protect your muscle mass and strength.
It's not the flashy one weird trick headline, is it?
Definitely not. But it's the sustainable path, the one that actually works long-term for changing your body composition in a healthy way.
Makes sense. It's about synergy, not competition.
Exactly. And maybe here's a final thought, something for you to chew on after this. We talked about resistance training being key for holding on to muscle while you lose weight. That's its big advantage in the fat loss phase, right? Protecting that fat-free mass. But think longer term. What about the ongoing metabolic cost of maintaining that muscle you preserved, or maybe even built? That slightly higher resting metabolism you now have, maybe months or years after the diet phase is over. How does that factor into keeping the weight off? It suggests the ideal program isn't just about what burns the most calories today. It's maybe more about finding that sustainable blend of cardio and resistance training that your body can consistently recover from, not just for the next 12 weeks, but for the next few years.
Yeah.
Something to consider as you map out your own long-term approach.